welcome back. Now, there's growing concerns over challenges experienced by students in the missing middle during this lockdown period. They struggle with connectivity, a lack of devices as well as data. It seems the Department of Higher Education and Training isn't doing enough to help as well. But for more discussion on this, I'm joined now via Skype by Motheo Brodie, legal researcher for Section 27. Thank you so much, Motheo, for your time, and a warm good morning to you. I need you just to please paint us a picture of the reality which is currently faced by students and young people, particularly right now.
Thank you very much for having us, Tumelo, and good morning to your viewers. Now, we know that the lockdown was announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa during the month of March. And, universities were also part of the institutions that were closed. And since then, slowly but surely in the past weeks, universities have been reopening. And they've been reopening for online learning. Now, we know the situation in our country and the gross inequality in our country means that there's a disproportionate access to resources by many of our families. And now we know that there's students from poor and working class households who don't necessarily have what is required to access online learning, which universities have resorted to, things like laptops, things like data. Now, the Minister of Higher Education has announced measures, a plan to provide NSFAS students in particular with technological devices and data. However, there is that grouping of students that we know as the missing middle students. Right. And those are students that are considered too rich to qualify for NSFAS, but too poor to access loans and to be able to access all these devices. Now, these students have had no provision whatsoever, and there's growing concern that as universities go into this online learning and it continues, many of them will be left out and will be forced to deregister. Which is quite unfortunate and should be a cause for concern for most of us, all of us in fact.
Motheo, have the students heard from particularly the minister as well as universities and how they can bridge that gap? As you've mentioned there's some students who don't have access to whether it is accessories or laptops or the equipment or even data for that matter. But in terms of reaching us so that at least the academic year is not interrupted, have they received that communication?
The sector is quite spread out. So, for instance, we know that historically advantaged institutions, these are institutions, or historically white institutions like Wits University, UCT, are in a far better position than historically disadvantaged institutions. And so institutions like Wits and UCT have gone some way in providing these devices to students. However, those historically disadvantaged students or institutions haven't had such measures put in place. Now, the minister has spoken about, for the missing middle in particular, facilitating some sort of loan scheme with the private sector, but there's been no further communication about that. So, these students are sort of left in the dark right now while learning continues. And it's quite unfortunate, even with the students that are on NSFAS. We've heard from the minister who briefed the nation on Tuesday that a tender will be opened for acquiring devices for NSFAS students only this week, Friday. Now, learning has been open, online learning has been open since 1st of June, at least formally, since the 1st of June. Now, if the tender process is only being opened on Friday, when is that process going to be concluded, and when are students going to receive these laptops and data packages?
Right.
Especially because students are now nearing exams and there have been submissions throughout this period. So students are really left out in the dark during this period.
Because that would be then my next question, to say that if we're having this process only coming on, which quite frankly is late, it was supposed to have done perhaps a bit earlier on, what does it mean then for the academic year? Has there been provision given to students as to whether they will be given more time, compensated with more time, as to when a lockdown regulations or restrictions will be eased down and they will be able to go back to university, and perhaps the academic year pushed even further, which I heard with some of the resolutions which the minister had said that perhaps the academic year might need to end as late as next year, January?
Sure. Like I said, it's hard to give a comprehensive answer about the situation that all students are in. But what we have been seeing is that, for instance, Students at the UFS are complaining that they are still burdened with short turnaround times for submission of assignments, and so the learning program is continuing largely while students don't have these devices. We know the University of UCT, for instance, has made provision for students to be able to deregister from courses up until last week Friday, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think increasingly that's the route that students are taking because there is no support for them. Students are now opting to deregister. And it's those students that are coming from working class families and poor families, as well as those students that we're particularly worried about also that are in the missing middle, that will be going the route of deregistering. And the wealthy students will be able to continue the learning program largely uninterrupted. And so this is quite disproportionate. And we really, really need the Department of Higher Education to provide assistance timely and urgently. And moreover, I think, this is an opportunity for other players in the private sector, for instance. This is an opportunity perhaps for the Solidarity Fund to also lend a helping hand during this crisis for students, because really they are going through a very, very difficult period with very little support from the department.
All right, legal researcher at Section 27, Motheo Brodie, thank you so much for your time.